Thank you for joining Marie and I in our presentation for enhancing unit-based building models through Revit and Dynamo.
My name is Marie Williams-Bell, and I am an applications expert with the Building Solutions Division at IMAGINiT Technologies. I'm currently located in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I have 7 years of Revit and BIM experience.
My name is Jamie Owens, based out of our Cincinnati, Ohio office, as well as I'm an application expert in our Building Solutions Division of IMAGINiT Technologies. I have 10 years of architecture industry experience with 13 years of Revit and BIM experience. Enhancing unit-based building models through Revit and Dynamo. Unit-based projects range from doing hotels to multifamily, hospitals, but they all come with this idea or need for repetitive design. We're taking this unit, we're going to replicate it over in multiple different areas. Those typically result or need to be in a quick design turnaround. So we're here to try to identify and show a way we can use Revit and Dynamo to reimagine how we can use those repetitive units and build those repetitive units and populate them throughout a design, and while identifying some of the pros and cons of the different workflows that are available.
So our learning objectives for this presentation are to talk about and compare the different methods that can be used for model-based projects, and we're going to talk about those pros and cons for those different methodology. We're also going to talk about what the most effective workflow might be based on the parameters of your project. We're going to talk about using Dynamo to leverage some time-saving benefits and to help push information into the units for our projects, as well as understanding the potential for Revit to help with cost and quantity takeoff and 4D modeling when it comes to unit-based projects. So these are the 3 units that we've included in our case study. As you can see, we've got 2 separate standard units, and then we've got 1 sort of suite unit. For our case study, we decided to go with the group method just because of the parameters of the project. It was the most effective and efficient way to model our units. So going on to the next slide. The 3 methods that you can use to do unit-based projects, aside from just manually doing it one by one, is assemblies, links, or model groups. Next slide. Revit assemblies come with a bunch of pros and 1 very big con. The pros being that you're able to quickly and easily collect multiple families into a single assembly. And assemblies do give you the ability to create unique views for that specific assembly, as well as schedules and a sheet. The cons of an assembly, however, are that assemblies are kind of looked at more as like a construction assembly versus like a unit or a kind of a module, if you will. So when you mirror or sometimes if you rotate an assembly, you can almost break that assembly itself and make it so that you have 2 separate assemblies for the same sort of unit.
The other approach or method is using links. Links, like assemblies, give us the ability to collect all our elements into a single file. Instead of a single assembly, it's a single file now. So we potentially have all of our furnishings, our interior walls, doors, things like that, and they're separate files. While we can create unique views for each of those links, that's going to happen in that link file. We can do it in the host file, but it's not as efficient potentially. We have the ability to create schedules the same way. We can schedule those linked information, but we're not going to be able to populate that data back through. And that's one of the cons we list over there. That data in that link model, we can't update that. So we have to go back to that original link model to update that information. It becomes a very difficult process to work with. We do have the ability to have multiple instances of links. So we have the ability to take that single link and copy it around 30 times in our project and only have 1 link to potentially update. Links do offer us the ability to keep our file sizes a little smaller, by not embedding the geometry in the host file. If our links get large, it could still offer some complexity to it, but it's going to help in the file size by having them linked. But as I mentioned, linking them requires a different workflow, and the fact that we have to now open that file separately, edit it in order to make any changes, even to update data that we potentially need to populate in there. And that data, really, that data limitations becomes one of the biggest struggles with links. The other option is to look at model groups, taking the idea of a link, for example, but now it's living inside of that host file. It becomes just a group. So we're collecting all that information. We can replicate it all around. We can mirror it and rotate it, that group, and actually reduce some of the complexities we have of hosted elements sometimes. But that data can also be the metadata that's inside of that model group and inside those elements in that group can be updated. We can populate certain information that as we go through there, start identifying information, door numbers, things like that. That can all be updated inside of in that host file. One of the challenges with model groups, though, is that it actually starts to balloon pretty quick as our model groups become more complex and we start nesting groups inside of groups and things like that. They become really heavy, and they can actually slow down Revit depending on computer specs and group sizes and things like that. Because that geometry is all hosted or living inside of that single file, that's going to make Revit's models pretty heavy. So again, there's the array of different methods, multiple pros and cons. We focused our case study on the model groups. We felt, based upon what we were doing, that was the better approach in our case study. But we'll show you a couple of some of the ways of using links as well as we go through. So again, we're using model groups. We have a fairly simple hotel, multi-story building, whatever you want to look at it here. And let me start the video. So again, we have multiple stories, 10 stories, multiple levels of similar units. We have 3 units, a unit A, unit B, and unit C, that we'll be doing. As you can see here, those replicate up through all the different levels from 2 to 10 all the way up. Great use for a unit-based project.
So when we're developing the groups, the way that I like to move forward is by just starting off by making the groups out of just the most simple elements that we can already use. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Jamie. So the groups have already been created using just some of the walls here, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add in all of the rest of the components. So I'm just going in to edit the group. I'm choosing the option to add components to the group, and I'm just going to go through, and I've already laid out the furniture on one floor. So I'm just adding that into the group very quickly. And if you watch over here on the right in just a minute, when I click finish, it's going to populate all of the groups with all of that furniture and all of those components that I'm adding in right this moment. And it's going to be very, very quick and a much faster way of adding in this information than trying to model it all at once and then selecting it and grouping. So it'll take just a minute to think, and then you'll see on both locations of the group on both sides of the building and all the way up on every single floor, it's going to populate with all of those components. Okay.
So now that we've created those groups, right? We have group A, group B, and group C. Let's deploy those. So let's populate them throughout. Marie showed where she had that one group, but let's go in and look at it, right? I'm looking at unit level 4 here. I got my shell and my dividing walls. and I have all these different groups, group A, B, and C. I've identified a specific insertion point for each one of these groups. That will help us lay this out down the road. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go up here and place this model group. Notice I've got group A, so I'm going to lay it out in that same corner, use that same insertion point, place it in there. I've populated that one. Now there's multiple ways groups can be placed. They're also identified in the project browser, creating instances of that and place it in here. So there's unit B that's been placed. I'm going to place unit C in a similar fashion over here. Now, the last two are a unit A and unit B, but they're actually mirrors of each other. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to place it, but you can see I place it in the same corner, but I need to mirror it. So I'm going to use the mirror tool, and I'm not mirroring the actual objects, I'm mirroring the actual group itself. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to actually mirror that entire group, finish it, and do the same thing with unit B as well. So I'm going to switch my unit, come in here, and place it. You always got to remember which side you're placing it on and what side it needs to mirror about and the host is, so we can mirror it properly and get the right direction.
So sometimes after you've completed your model components or your model groups, you might decide that it's really bogging down your model too much and you might want to convert yourself to the links option. Fortunately, this is a very easy process. All you have to do is just convert your groups to links. So if you go to the next slide. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how this is done. First thing you're going to want to do is select one of your model groups, right click, choose the select all instances and select all an entire project. Otherwise, you're going to leave groups in all of the other locations except for this one. Now that I've selected all, I'm going to look over my properties. You can see that I've got 18 selected. That's how I know I've got them all. And then right up there in the contextual ribbon, I'm just going to click on links or link to convert these model groups to links. First thing it's going to ask is, do I have an existing link that I want to use, or do I want to replace it with a new project file? I don't have an existing one, so I'm going to replace it with a new project file. I'm going to find the right location. And then I have the option set here to leave it as the same file name as the group name. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to click on save, and it's going to think for just a second. And it's going to convert all of those groups into separate instances of a link. So now you can kind of tell like the graphics are a little bit different. If I click on just one of those, you can see, click on that one, there we go. You can see in the properties over here that it's actually a link now instead of a model group. Okay. So sometimes you might convert a link to or a model group to a link, and you might decide that you want it to be a group again. So also a very simple process. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. Same sort of process as before. You're going to select one of the model links. You're going to right click, select all instances and entire project again, so you get every single instance of that link. And then all you're going to do is, again, make sure that you've got all 18 of them selected. And in the contextual ribbon, you're just going to click on bind link. It's going to give you this option here. We don't have any attached details, so it wouldn't matter if we left that checked, but I'm going to uncheck it. And then it's telling me that there's an existing model group in the project. It's not placed, but it still exists in the project, named unit A, same as the model. I'm going to say, yes, I do want to replace that because I know it's the same unit. And then in just a second, you're going to see that I get a pop-up saying that every instance of the model link that I had replaced that with is now out of the project, but it's still available if I want to continue placing that link. So there's that pop-up. I'm actually going to say remove link because I don't want to keep the link there. And then now my model links have been converted back to model groups. So you see here, I'm going to select it. And if you look at the properties again, you'll see that this is now a model group again. Okay.
So now that we have our model groups developed, we have them deployed throughout the building. How do we figure out a way to quantify what we have? That's one of the benefits of the groups. We can create these things quickly, deploy them out fairly quickly, but how do we then get the information out of those groups into something that's quantifiable? So I'm going to go through here and look, right? We have those different units, unit A, unit B, unit C. Each of these are individual groups or the individual instances of each group type. So looking at that, then if I drill in deeper and look at all those, right, as Marie showed before, we have 18 different units of these. But then I drill in deeper into one of these groups, we see I have a bed. But there's nothing that identifies in that bed that it belongs to group A. There's nothing in there that tells us that, right? So I'm going to come in here. I'm actually going to create a schedule. I want to create a schedule to see all the information in the entire project, right? So I'm going to call it, it's a multi-category schedule. It's the unit elements schedule. It's everything in there. So I'm going to come in here and there's no parameter that out of the box that says group type or group name. So we're going to come in here and I'm going to create a parameter called unit identifier, something that we can use to help get our elements something to relate them to a group. I'm going to apply it to all those elements, do some organization of that parameter. One of the key things back there was identifying that it's going to be an instance parameter for every group instance. I'm going to add in some additional parameters of category and family type and count, just so we can start to see some information in here. I'm going to do some sorting. I'm going to leave it all itemized. I don't want to filter anything right now. I want to see all the information, see what I get. So I look at it, and you'll see here, I have a lot of information now. Right? I have all my casework, all my curtain panels, all my curtain wall mullions. Everything in this project exists in that schedule. But I only want the units, stuff in the units. So on this one, I'm going to use Dynamo. I'm going to say, look in my project, collect the model groups, get their names, get all the elements in every single group. Right? It's going to look for those, gather all that information, and it's going to give me a list. Right? And see, there's over 3,000 elements, walls, doors, tubs, toilets, as well as things that I potentially don't want or don't really need. Things like sketch plane and sketch and model curves and dimensions. These are all residual elements of the actual elements that we're looking at. So things like dimensions and model curves are results of having floors as part of our model groups, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those and information, those additional parameters or additional elements out of those groups, and we're going to filter those out, right? So I'm going to sketch plane, the model curve, right? So I'm going to go through here and filter all of those out, because so in the end, I only want the actual geometric elements, the floors, the walls, the toilets, things like that. And I'm going to populate that unit identifier parameter that we created back at the schedule. I'm going to populate that with the actual group name so that all those are associated to. So I'm back up here. I'm going to unfreeze that last part so I can fully process the whole thing, rerun the graph again. And you can see up here now I have over 1,400 elements that has been processed. So those are the elements that have been, after they've been filtered down, we have all the different tubs, the chairs, the furniture, the walls, the doors, things like that. Go back to my schedule now. I still see everything. I still see my curtain panels. I still see my curtain wall mullions. But then if I scroll down deeper, I'll see, oh, there's unit A. So I can see the casework. So anything that wasn't in a group is still in the schedule, but I don't want it to be. So now is when I come in here and I filter out. I filter that information out so that it does not exist. So if it doesn't have the unit information in it, it doesn't exist in the schedule. So I filtered it all out. You see now those 1,400 elements, 1,450 elements now show up in there. Now let's do some additional sorting and organization here and cleanup of this schedule. Now I've broken the schedule down to show Unit A. Unit A with all the different pieces of the families that are in here and their counts. So it's just a clean way of seeing these. Now this doesn't give me a per unit. This gives me a total count of all those elements that are in Unit A. We could potentially do some further modifications and manipulation of the schedule to potentially get individual instances of that. But I'm going to go through here now and actually look at the actual file, or not file, but the actual plan. Let's go back to the plan here and look at those elements, right? So now that I drill in, I can see inside of there that unit identifier is unit B. It's populated with that information, right? So that's how it's going into the schedule. That's what Dynamo is populating. Now I'm going to create another schedule identifying the model groups. I want to get a schedule of just model groups. Now, unfortunately, this schedule type doesn't give us the elements inside the group, but gives us the ability to actually schedule the groups themselves. So I'm going to get their type, I'm going to get their count, I'm going to get what level of the building that they're on. To do a little bit of maintenance on it, a little sorting, a little grouping, just to keep it clean, organized. Here, I'm going to uncheck itemize every instance because I want to get a unit count. So you can see here now I have unit A, B, and C for each level of the building. I'm going to do another piece here. I'm going to do a little break between each level just so we get a sense, easier way to read that schedule. So I have each level with each unit type and how many units in each type. I can potentially have that on a sheet as well as the actual element schedule on a sheet. Identify for each unit A. For all unit A's, I have 18 of these or 36 of these. So it's a way for us to start getting that quantity out of our model with that geometry that we've modeled. Now I'm going to take it over to Marie to wrap it up.
So now that we've talked a little bit about how to make the different types and using the different methodology, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this table here is going to tell you the different functionalities that we find can be very important when you're modeling a unit-based project and whether or not that functionality is available in each different method. First one being schedulability. So a lot of times when you're doing a unit-based project, you need to know how many of what unit types are on each level, how many total of each unit type you have, et cetera, anything like that. So fortunately, all of these methods, group links and assemblies, are all schedulable, and they also are all capable of using phasing. Design options, however, are only available via groups and links, though keep in mind that links are going to require that you do a little bit more coordination. Groups is the only method that really provides the ability to do progressive revisions or additions natively inside of a hosting model. If you have links, then you need to go inside of each link to make those revisions. It could be something like a wall type change or anything like that. It means you're going to have to go into each separate link one by one and do that over and over and over again. Assemblies don't typically like to have revisions made or additions made to them, especially if you've got multiple of that same assembly placed. It's going to duplicate that assembly and make a new type. Same thing with revisions and additions after placement. Groups and links both give you that functionality. Assemblies, again, are going to start to have issues if you've already placed multiple instances of that same assembly. The ability to mirror or rotate You can do both with groups and links. It makes it very easy to lay out bunches of different units all at once and mirror them and rotate them as you need to if you've got to go across a corridor or what have you. Assemblies are going to have a problem with mirroring. If you mirror an assembly, it's going to become a new assembly type. Assemblies do give you the option, though, to create type-specific views and schedules very, very quickly, even creating its own sheet right out the bat, which is great if you're creating in large plans or elevations or anything like that. Assemblies do make that very quick and easy. Um, a lot of times you're going to want to manage information via a schedule in a project. Groups and assemblies will both give you that option. You cannot make changes to any sort of information in a link through a project that's linking it in. So that functionality is not available through the link method. Joining and hosting with external objects, so like wall joins or anything like that, are only going to be possible through groups and assemblies. In a link, you can set it up so it'll like butt up against the wall, but you can't have anything hosted inside of your hosting model or join anything. And then finally, nesting. So nesting can be a very popular use in a unit-based project. If you have something like a restroom that's going to be in multiple different unit types, you might want to just create a group or a link of that unit type or that restroom type and nest it in so that you can update that restroom and it'll update in all of the units that have that same restroom type. Assemblies do not allow nesting, but groups do. Links, you kind of have that functionality as well. It's not quite as streamlined as grouping, but that functionality is possible. So that is the end of our presentation. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you guys all enjoy the rest of Elevate by IMAGINiT. Okay, that is a wrap.